Ballad from Grimm's Fairy Tales, by Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm, translated by Edgar Taylor and Marion Edwards. This recording is in the public domain. Read by Bob Neufeld. As a merry young huntsman was once going briskly along through a wood, there came up a little old woman, and said to him, "Good day, good day. You seem merry enough, but I am hungry and thirsty. Do pray give me something to eat." The huntsman took pity on her, and put his hand in his pocket, and gave her what he had. Then he wanted to go his way, but she took hold of him, and said, "Listen, my friend, to what I am going to tell you. I will reward you for your kindness. Go your way, and after a little time you will come to a tree, where you will see 9 birds sitting on a cloak. Shoot into the midst of them, and one will fall down dead. The cloak will fall too. Take it. It is a wishing cloak, and when you wear it you will find yourself at any place where you may wish to be. Cut open the dead bird, take out its heart and keep it, and you will find a piece of gold under your pillow every morning when you rise. It is the bird's heart that will bring you this good luck." The huntsman thanked her, and thought to himself, "If all this does happen, it will be a fine thing for me." When he had gone 100 steps or so, he heard a screaming and chirping in the branches above him, and looked up, and saw a flock of birds pulling a cloak with their bills and feet, screaming, fighting, and tugging at each other, as if each wished to have it himself. "Well," said the huntsman, "this is wonderful. This happens just as the old woman said." Then he shot into the midst of them, so that their feathers flew all about. Off went the flock chattering away, but one fell dead, and the cloak with it. Then the huntsman did as the old woman told him, cut open the bird, took out the heart, and carried the cloak home with him. The next morning when he awoke he lifted up his pillow, and there lay the piece of gold glittering underneath. The same happened next day, and indeed every day when he arose. He heaped up a great deal of gold, and at last thought to himself, "Of what use is this gold to me whilst I am at home? I will go out into the world and look about me." Then he took leave of his friends, and hung his bag and bow about his neck, and went his way. It so happened that his road one day led through a thick wood, at the end of which was a large castle in a green meadow, and at one of the windows stood an old woman with a very beautiful young lady by her side, looking about them. Now the old woman was a witch, and said to the young lady, "There is a young man coming out of the wood who carries a wonderful prize. We must get it away from him, my dear child, for it is more fit for us than for him. He has a bird's heart that brings a piece of gold under his pillow every morning." Meantime the huntsman came nearer and looked at the lady, and said to himself, "I have been travelling so long that I should like to go into this castle and rest myself, for I have money enough to pay for anything I want." But the real reason was that he wanted to see more of the beautiful lady. Then he went into the house and was welcomed kindly, and it was not long before he was so much in love that he thought of nothing else but looking at the lady's eyes and doing everything that she wished. Then the old woman said, "Now is the time for getting the bird's heart." So the lady stole it away, and he never found any more gold under his pillow, for it lay now under the young lady's, and the old woman took it away every morning. But he was so much in love that he never missed his prize. "Well," said the old witch, "we have got the bird's heart, but not the wishing cloak yet, and that we must also get." "Let us leave him that," said the young lady. "He has already lost his wealth." Then the witch was very angry, and said, "Such a cloak is a very rare and wonderful thing, and I must and will have it." So she did as the old woman told her, and set herself at the window, and looked about the country, and seemed very sorrowful. Then the huntsman said, "What makes you so sad?" "Alas, dear sir," said she, "yonder lies the granite rock where all the costly diamonds grow, and I want so much to go there that whenever I think of it I cannot help being sorrowful. For who can reach it? Only the birds and the flies. Man cannot." "If that's all your grief," said the huntsman, "I'll take you there with all my heart." So he drew her under his cloak, and the moment he wished to be on the granite mountain, they were both there. The diamonds glittered so on all sides that they were delighted with the sight, and picked up the finest. But the old witch made a deep sleep come upon him, and he said to the young lady, "Let us sit down and rest ourselves a little. I am so tired that I cannot stand any longer." So they sat down, and he laid his head in her lap and fell asleep, and whilst he was sleeping on, she took the cloak from his shoulders, hung it on her own, picked up the diamonds, and wished herself home again. When he awoke and found that his lady had tricked him, and left him alone on the wild rock, he said, "Alas, what roguery there is in the world!" And there he sat, in great grief and fear, not knowing what to do. Now this rock belonged to fierce giants who lived upon it, and as he saw 3 of them striding about, he thought to himself, "I can only save myself by feigning to be asleep." So he laid himself down, as if he were in a sound sleep. When the giants came up to him, the first pushed him with his foot, and said, "What worm is this that lies here curled up?" "Tread upon him and kill him," said the second. "It's not worth the trouble," said the third. "Let him live. He'll be climbing higher up the mountain, and some cloud will come rolling and carry him away." And they passed on. But the huntsman had heard all they said, and as soon as they were gone, he climbed to the top of the mountain, and when he had sat there a short time, a cloud came rolling around him, and caught him in a whirlwind, and bore him along for some time, till it settled in a garden, and he fell quite gently to the ground, amongst the greens and cabbages. Then he looked around him, and said, "I wish I had something to eat. If not, I shall be worse off than before. For here I see neither apples, nor pears, nor any kinds of fruits, nothing but vegetables." At last he thought to himself, "I can eat salad. It will refresh and strengthen me." So he picked out a fine head, and ate of it. But scarcely had he swallowed 2 bites, when he felt himself quite changed, and saw with horror that he was turned into a donkey. However, he still felt very hungry, and the salad tasted very nice, so he ate on till he came to another kind of salad, and scarcely had he tasted it when he felt another change come over him, and soon saw that he was lucky enough to find his old shape again. Then he laid himself down and slept off a little of his weariness. And when he awoke the next morning, he broke off a head both of the good and the bad salad, and thought to himself, "This will help me to my fortune again, and enable me to pay off some folks for their treachery." So he went away to try and find the castle of his friends, and after wandering about a few days he luckily found it. Then he stained his face all over brown, so that even his mother would not have known him, and went into the castle and asked for lodging. "I am so tired," said he, "that I can go no farther." "Countryman," said the witch, "who are you, and what is your business?" "I am," said he, "a messenger sent by the king to find the finest salad that grows under the sun. I have been lucky enough to find it, and have brought it with me, but the heat of the sun scorches so that it begins to wither, and I don't know that I can carry it farther." When the witch and the young lady heard of his beautiful salad, they longed to taste it, and said, "Dear countryman, let us just taste it." "To be sure," answered he, "I have 2 heads of it with me, and will give you 1. So he opened his bag, and gave them the bad. Then the witch herself took it into the kitchen to be dressed, and when it was ready she could not wait till it was carried up, but took a few leaves immediately and put them in her mouth, and scarcely were they swallowed than she lost her own form, and ran braying down into the court in the form of a donkey. Now the servant-maid came into the kitchen, and seeing the salad ready, was going to carry it up. But on the way she too felt a wish to taste it as the old woman had done, and ate some leaves. So she also was turned into a donkey, and ran after the other, letting the dish with the salad fall on the ground. The messenger sat all this time with the beautiful young lady, and as nobody came with the salad, and she longed to taste it, she said, "I don't know where the salad can be." Then he thought something must have happened, and said, "I will go into the kitchen and see." And as he went he saw 2 donkeys in the court running about, and the salad lying on the ground. "All right," said he. "Those 2 have had their share." Then he took up the rest of the leaves, laid them on the dish, and brought them to the young lady, saying, "I bring you the dish myself, that you may not wait any longer." So she ate of it, and, like the others, ran off into the court, braying away. Then the huntsman washed his face, and went into the court that they might know him. "Now you shall be paid for your roguery," said he, and tied them all 3 to a rope, and took them along with him, till he came to a mill and knocked at the window. "What's the matter?" said the miller. "I have 3 tiresome beasts here," said the other. "If you will take them, give them food and room, and treat them as I tell you, I will pay you whatever you ask." "With all my heart," said the miller. "But how shall I treat them?" Then the huntsman said, "Give the old one stripes 3 times a day, and hay once. Give the next," who was the servant-maid, "stripes once a day, and hay 3 times. And give the youngest, who was the beautiful lady, hay 3 times a day, and no stripes." For he could not find it in his heart to have her beaten. After this he went back to the castle, where he found everything he wanted. Some days after, the miller came to him, and told him that the old donkey was dead. "The other 2," said he, "are alive and eat, but are so sorrowful that they cannot last long." Then the huntsman pitied them, and told the miller to drive them back to him, and when they came he gave them some of the good salad to eat. And the beautiful young lady fell upon her knees before him, and said, "Oh, dearest huntsman, forgive me all the ill I have done you. My mother forced me to it. It was against my will, for I always loved you very much. Your wishing cloak hangs up in the closet, and as for the bird's heart, I will give it to you." But he said, "Keep it. It will be just the same thing, for I mean to make you my wife." So they were married, and lived together very happily till they died. End of the Salad. The Story of the Youth Who Went Forth to Learn What Fear Was, from Grimm's Fairy Tales, by Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm. Translated by Edgar Taylor and Marion Edwards. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Bob Neufeld. A certain father had 2 sons, the elder of whom was smart and sensible, and could do everything. But the younger was stupid, and could neither learn nor understand anything. And when people saw him, they said, "There's a fellow who will give his father some trouble." When anything had to be done, it was always the elder who was forced to do it. But if his father bade him fetch anything when it was late or in the night time, and the way led through the churchyard or any other dismal place, he answered, "Oh, no, father, I'll not go there. It makes me shudder," for he was afraid. Or when stories were told by the fire at night which made the flesh creep, the listener sometimes said, "Oh, it makes me shudder." The younger sat in the corner and listened with the rest of them, and could not imagine what they could mean. "They are always saying, 'It makes me shudder, it makes me shudder.' It does not make me shudder," thought he. "That too must be an art of which I understand nothing." Now it came to pass that his father said to him one day, "Hearken to me, you fellow in the corner there. You are growing tall and strong, and you too must learn something by which you can earn your bread. Look how your brother works, but you do not even earn your salt." "Well, father," he replied, "I am quite willing to learn something. Indeed, if it could be but managed, I should like to learn how to shudder. I don't understand that at all yet." The elder brother smiled when he heard that, and thought to himself, "Goodness, what a blockhead that brother of mine is! He will never be good for anything as long as he lives. He who wants to be a sickle must bend himself betimes." The father sighed and answered him, "You shall soon learn what it is to shudder, but you will not earn your bread by that." Soon after this the sexton came to the house on a visit, and the father bewailed his trouble, and told him how his younger son was so backward in every respect that he knew nothing and learnt nothing. "Just think," said he, "when I asked him how he was going to earn his bread, he actually wanted to learn to shudder." "If that be all," replied the sexton, "he can learn that with me. Send him to me, and I will soon polish him." The father was glad to do it, for he thought, "It will train the boy a little." The sexton therefore took him into his house, and he had to ring the church bell. After a day or two, the sexton awoke him at midnight, and bade him arise and go up into the church tower and ring the bell. "You shall soon learn what shuddering is," thought he, and secretly went there before him. And when the boy was at the top of the tower and turned round, and was just going to take hold of the bell rope, he saw a white figure standing on the stairs opposite the sounding-hole. "Who is there?" cried he, but the figure made no reply, and did not move or stir. "Give an answer," cried the boy, "or take yourself off. You have no business here at night." The sexton, however, remained standing motionless, that the boy might think he was a ghost. The boy cried a second time, "What do you want here? Speak, if you are an honest fellow, or I will throw you down the steps." The sexton thought, "He can't mean to be as bad as his words," uttered no sound, and stood as if he were made of stone. Then the boy called to him for the third time, and as that was also to no purpose, he ran against him and pushed the ghost down the stairs, so that it fell down the 10 steps and remained lying there in the corner. Thereupon he rang the bell, went home, and without saying a word went to bed and fell asleep. The sexton's wife waited a long time for her husband, but he did not come back. At length she became uneasy, and wakened the boy, and asked, "Do you know where my husband is?" "He climbed up the tower before you did." "No, I don't know," replied the boy, "but some one was standing by the sounding-hole on the other side of the steps, and as he would neither give an answer nor go away, I took him for a scoundrel and threw him downstairs. Just go there, and you will see if it was he. I should be sorry if it were." The woman ran away and found her husband, who was lying moaning in the corner, and had broken his leg. She carried him down, and then, with loud screams, she hastened to the boy's father. "Your boy," cried she, "has been the cause of a great misfortune. He has thrown my husband down the steps so that he broke his leg. Take the good-for-nothing fellow out of our house." The father was terrified, and ran thither and scolded the boy. "What wicked tricks are these?" said he. "The devil must have put them into your head." "Father," he replied, "do listen to me. I am quite innocent. He was standing there by night like one intent on doing evil. I did not know who it was, and I entreated him 3 times either to speak or to go away." "Ah," said the father, "I have nothing but unhappiness with you. Go out of my sight. I will see you no more." "Yes, father, right willingly. Wait only until it is day. Then I will go forth and learn how to shudder, and then I shall, at any rate, understand one art which will support me." "Learn what you will," spoke the father. "It is all the same to me. Here are 50 thalers for you. Take these and go into the wide world and tell no one from whence you come and who is your father, for I have reason to be ashamed of you." "Yes, father, it shall be as you will. If you desire nothing more than that, I can easily keep it in mind." When the day dawned, therefore, the boy put his 50 thalers into his pocket, and went forth on the great highway, and continually said to himself, "If I could but shudder! If I could but shudder!" Then a man approached, who heard this conversation which the youth was holding with himself, and when they had walked a little farther to where they could see the gallows, the man said to him, "Look, there is the tree where 7 men have married the rope-maker's daughter, and are now learning how to fly. Sit down beneath it and wait till night comes, and you will soon learn how to shudder." "If that is all that is wanted," answered the youth, "it is easily done. But if I learn how to shudder as fast as that, you shall have my 50 thalers. Just come back to me early in the morning." Then the youth went to the gallows, sat down beneath it, and waited till evening came. And as he was cold, he lighted himself a fire. But at midnight the wind blew so sharply that in spite of his fire he could not get warm. And as the wind knocked the hanged men against each other, and they moved backwards and forwards, he thought to himself, "If you shiver below by the fire, how those up above must freeze and suffer!" And as he felt pity for them, he raised the ladder, and climbed up, unbound one of them after the other, and brought down all 7. Then he stoked the fire, blew it, and set them all round it to warm themselves. But they sat there and did not stir, and the fire caught their clothes. So he said, "Take care, or I will hang you up again." The dead men, however, did not hear, but were quite silent, and let their rags go on burning. At this he grew angry, and said, "If you will not take care, I cannot help you. I will not be burnt with you." And he hung them up again each in his turn. Then he sat down by his fire and fell asleep, and the next morning the man came to him and wanted to have the 50 thalers, and said, "Well, do you know how to shudder?" "No," answered he. "How should I know? Those fellows up there did not open their mouths, and were so stupid that they let the few old rags which they had on their bodies get burnt." Then the man saw that he could not get the 50 thalers that day, and went away, saying, "Such a youth has never come my way before." The youth likewise went his way, and once more began to mutter to himself, "Ah, if I could but shudder! Ah, if I could but shudder!" A waggoner who was striding behind him heard this, and asked, "Who are you?" "I don't know," answered the youth. Then the waggoner asked, "From whence do you come?" "I know not." "Who is your father?" "That I may not tell you." "What is it that you are always muttering between your teeth?" "Ah," replied the youth, "I do so wish I could shudder, but no one can teach me how." "Enough of your foolish chatter," said the waggoner. "Come, go with me. I will see about a place for you." The youth went with the waggoner, and in the evening they arrived at an inn where they wished to pass the night. Then at the entrance of the parlour the youth again said quite loudly, "If I could but shudder! If I could but shudder!" The host, who heard this, laughed, and said, "If that is your desire, there ought to be a good opportunity for you here." "Ah, be silent," said the hostess. "So many prying persons have already lost their lives, it would be a pity and a shame if such beautiful eyes as these should never see the daylight again." But the youth said, "However difficult it may be, I will learn it. For this purpose indeed have I journeyed forth." he let the host have no rest until the latter told him that not far from thence stood a haunted castle where any one could very easily learn what shuddering was, if he would but watch in it for 3 nights. The king had promised that he who would venture should have his daughter to wife, and she was the most beautiful maiden the sun shone on. Likewise in the castle lay great treasures, which were guarded by evil spirits, and these treasures would then be freed, and would make a poor man rich enough. Already many men had gone into the castle, but as yet none had come out again. Then the youth went next morning to the king, and said, "If it be allowed, I will willingly watch these 3 nights in the haunted castle." The king looked at him, and as the youth pleased him, he said, "You may ask for 3 things to take into the castle with you, but they must be things without life." Then he answered, "Then I ask for a fire, a turning lathe, and a cutting board with the knife." The king had these things carried into the castle for him during the day. When the night was drawing near, the youth went up and made himself a bright fire in one of the rooms, placing the cutting board and knife beside it, and seated himself by the turning lathe. "Ah, if I could but shudder," said he, "but I shall not learn it here either." Towards midnight he was about to poke his fire, and as he was blowing it, something cried suddenly from one corner. "Oh, meow! How cold we are!" "You fools!" cried he. "What are you crying about? If you are cold, come and take a seat by the fire and warm yourselves." And when he had said that, 2 great black cats came with one tremendous leap, and sat down on each side of him, and looked savagely at him with their fiery eyes. After a short time, when they had warmed themselves, they said, "Comrade, shall we have a game of cards?" "Why not?" he replied, "but just show me your paws." Then they stretched out their claws. "Oh," said he, "what long nails you have! Wait, I must first cut them for you." Thereupon he seized them by the throats, put them on the cutting board, and screwed their feet fast. "I have looked at your fingers," said he, "and my fancy for card-playing has gone." And he struck them dead, and threw them out into the water. But when he had made away with these 2, and was about to sit down again by his fire, out from every hole and corner came black cats and black dogs with red-hot chains, and more of them came, until he could no longer move, and they yelled horribly, and got on his fire, pulled it to pieces, and tried to put it out. He watched them for a while quietly, but at last, when they were going too far, he seized his cutting-knife, and cried, "Away with you, vermin!" and began to cut them down. Some of them ran away, the others he killed and threw out into the fish-pond. When he came back, he fanned the embers of his fire again and warmed himself, and as he thus sat, his eyes would keep open no longer, and he felt a desire to sleep. Then he looked round and saw a great bed in the corner. "That is the very thing for me," said he, and got into it. When he was just going to shut his eyes, however, the bed began to move of its own accord, and went over the whole of the castle. "That's right," said he, "but go faster." Then the bed rolled on, as if 6 horses were harnessed to it, up and down, over thresholds and stairs, but suddenly, hop, hop, it turned over upside down, and lay on him like a mountain. But he threw quilts and pillows up into the air, got out, and said, "Now any one who likes may drive," and lay down by his fire and slept till it was day. In the morning the king came, and when he saw him lying there on the ground, he thought the evil spirits had killed him, and he was dead. Then said he, "After all, it is a pity for so handsome a man." The youth heard it, got up, and said, "It has not come to that yet." Then the king was astonished, but very glad, and asked how he had fared. "Very well indeed," answered he. One night is past. The 2 others will pass likewise." Then he went to the innkeeper, who opened his eyes very wide, and said, "I never expected to see you alive again. Have you learnt how to shudder yet?" "No," said he, "it is all in vain. If some one would but tell me." The second night he again went up into the old castle, sat down by the fire, and once more began his old song, "If I could but shudder." When midnight came, an uproar and noise of tumbling about was heard. At first it was low, but it grew louder and louder. Then it was quiet for a while, and at length, with a loud scream, half a man came down the chimney and fell before him. "Hullo!" cried he. "Another half belongs to this. This is not enough." Then the uproar began again. There was a roaring and howling, and the other half fell down likewise. "Wait," said he, "I will just stoke up a fire a little for you." When he had done that and looked round again, the 2 pieces were joined together, and a hideous man was sitting in his place. "This is no part of our bargain," said the youth. "The bench is mine." The man wanted to push him away. The youth, however, would not allow that, but thrust him off with all his strength, and seated himself again in his own place. Then still more men fell down, one after the other. They brought 9 dead men's legs and 2 skulls, and set them up, and played at 9-pins with them. The youth also wanted to play, and said, "Listen, you, can I join you?" "Yes, if you have any money." "Money enough," replied he, "but your balls are not quite round." Then he took the skulls and put them in the lathe, and turned them till they were round. "There now, they will roll better," said he. "Hurrah! Now we'll have fun." He played with them and lost some of his money, but when it struck 12, everything vanished from his sight. He lay down and quietly fell asleep. Next morning the king came to inquire after him. "How has it fared with you this time?" asked he. "I have been playing at 9-pins," he answered, "and have lost a couple of farthings." "Have you not shuddered, then?" "What?" said he. "I have had a wonderful time. If I did but know what it was to shudder." The third night he sat again on his bench, and said quite sadly, "If I could but shudder." When it grew late, 6 tall men came in and brought a coffin. Then he said, "Aha! That is certainly my little cousin, who died only a few days ago." And he beckoned with his finger, and cried, "Come, little cousin, come." They placed the coffin on the ground, but he went to it and took the lid off, and a dead man lay therein. He felt his face, but it was cold as ice. "Wait," said he, "I will warm you a little," and went to the fire and warmed his hand and laid it on the dead man's face, but he remained cold. Then he took him out and sat down by the fire and laid him on his breast, and rubbed his arms that the blood might circulate again. As this also did no good, he thought to himself, "When 2 people lie in bed together they warm each other," and carried him to the bed, covered him over, and lay down by him. After a short time the dead man became warm too, and began to move. Then said the youth, "See, little cousin, have I not warmed you?" The dead man, however, got up and cried, "Now I will strangle you." "What?" said he. "Is that the way you thank me? You shall at once go into your coffin again." And he took him up and threw him into it and shut the lid. Then came the 6 men and carried him away again. "I cannot manage to shudder," said he. "I shall never learn it here as long as I live." Then a man entered who was taller than all others, and looked terrible. He was old, however, and had a long white beard. "You wretch," cried he, "you shall soon learn what it is to shudder, for you shall die." "Not so fast," replied the youth. If I am to die, I shall have to have a say in it." "I will soon seize you," said the fiend. "Softly, softly. Do not talk so big. I am as strong as you are, and perhaps even stronger." "We shall see," said the old man. "If you are stronger, I will let go. Come, we will try." Then he led him by dark passages to a smith's forge, took an axe, and with one blow struck an anvil into the ground. "I can do better than that," said the youth, and went to the other anvil. The old man placed himself near and wanted to look on, and his white beard hung down. Then the youth seized the axe, split the anvil with one blow, and in it caught the old man's beard. "Now I have you," said the youth. "Now it is your turn to die." Then he seized an iron bar, and beat the old man till he moaned, and entreated him to stop, when he would give him great riches. The youth drew out the axe and let him go. The old man led him back into the castle, and in a cellar showed him 3 chests full of gold. "Of these," said he, "one part is for the poor, the other for the king, the third yours." In the meantime it struck 12, and the spirit disappeared, so that the youth stood in darkness. "I shall still be able to find my way out," said he, and felt about, found the way into the room, and slept there by his fire. Next morning the king came and said, "Now you must have learnt what shuddering is." "No," he answered. "What can it be? My dead cousin was here, and a bearded man came and showed me a great deal of money down below, but no one told me what it was to shudder." "Then," said the king, "you have saved the castle, and shall marry my daughter." "That is all very well," said he, "but still I do not know what it is to shudder." Then the gold was brought up, and the wedding celebrated. But however much the young king loved his wife, and however happy he was, he still said always, "If I could but shudder! If I could but shudder!" And this at last angered her. Her waiting-maid said, "I will find a cure for him. He shall soon learn what it is to shudder." She went out to the stream which flowed through the garden, and had a whole bucketful of gudgeons brought to her. At night, when the young king was sleeping, his wife was to draw the clothes off him, and empty the bucket full of cold water with gudgeons in it over him, so that the little fishes would sprawl about him. Then he woke up and cried, "Oh, what makes me shudder so, dear wife? Ah, now I know what it is to shudder." End of the story of the youth who went forth to learn what fear was. Grizzly Beard, from Grimm's Fairy Tales, by Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm. Translated by Edgar Taylor and Marion Edwards. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Bob Neufeld. A great king of a land far away in the East had a daughter who was very beautiful, but so proud and haughty and conceited that none of the princes who came to ask her in marriage was good enough for her, and she only made sport of them. Once upon a time the king held a great feast, and asked thither all her suitors, and they all sat in a row, ranged according to their rank, kings and princes and dukes and earls and counts and barons and knights. Then the princess came in, and as she passed by them she had something spiteful to say to every one. The first was too fat. "He's as round as a tub," said she. The next was too tall. "What a maypole," said she. The next was too short. "What a dumpling," said she. The fourth was too pale, and she called him Wall-face. The fifth was too red, so she called him Coxcomb. The sixth was not straight enough, so she said he was like a green stick that had been laid to dry over a baker's oven. and thus she had some joke to crack upon every one. But she laughed more than all at a good king who was there. "Look at him," said she. "His beard is like an old mop. He shall be called Grizzly Beard." So the king got the nickname of Grizzly Beard. But the old king was very angry when he saw how his daughter behaved, and how she ill-treated all his guests, and he vowed that, willing or unwilling, she should marry the first man, be he prince or beggar, that came to the door. 2 days after there came by a travelling fiddler, who began to play under the window and beg alms, and when the king heard him, he said, "Let him come in." So they brought in a dirty-looking fellow, and when he had sung before the king and the princess, he begged a boon. Then the king said, "You have sung so well that I will give you my daughter for your wife." The princess begged and prayed, but the king said, "I have sworn to give you to the first comer, and I will keep my word." So words and tears were of no avail. The parson was sent for, and she was married to the fiddler. When this was over, the king said, "Now get ready to go. You must not stay here. You must travel on with your husband." Then the fiddler went his way, and took her with him, and they soon came to a great wood. "Pray," said she, "whose is this wood?" "It belongs to King Grizzly Beard," answered he. "Hadst thou taken him, all had been thine." "Ah, unlucky wretch that I am!" sighed she. "Would that I had married King Grizzly Beard." Next they came to some fine meadows. "Whose are these beautiful green meadows?" said she. "They belong to King Grizzly Beard. Hadst thou taken him, they had all been thine." "Ah, unlucky wretch that I am!" said she. "Would that I had married King Grizzly Beard." Then they came to a great city. "Whose is this noble city?" said she. "It belongs to King Grizzly Beard. Hadst thou taken him, it had all been thine." "Ah, wretch that I am!" sighed she. "Why did I not marry King Grizzly Beard?" "That is no business of mine," said the fiddler. "Why should you wish for another husband? Am not I good enough for you?" At last they came to a small cottage. "What a paltry place!" said she. "To whom does this little dirty hole belong?" Then the fiddler said, "That is your and my house, where we are to live." "Where are your servants?" cried she. "What do we want with servants?" said he. "You must do for yourself whatever is to be done. Now make the fire, and put on water, and cook my supper, for I am very tired." But the princess knew nothing of making fires and cooking, and the fiddler was forced to help her. When they had eaten a very scanty meal, they went to bed, but the fiddler called her up very early in the morning to clean the house. Thus they lived for 2 days, and when they had eaten up all there was in the cottage, the man said, "Wife, we can't go on thus, spending money and earning nothing. You must learn to weave baskets." Then he went out and cut willows, and brought them home, and she began to weave, but it made her fingers very sore. "I see this work won't do," said he. "Try and spin. Perhaps you will do that better." So she sat down and tried to spin, but the threads cut her tender fingers till the blood ran. "See now," said the fiddler, "you are good for nothing. You can do no work. What a bargain I have got! However, I'll try to set up a trade in pots and pans, and you shall stand in the market and sell them." "Alas," sighed she, "if any of my father's court should pass by and see me standing in the market, how they will laugh at me." But her husband did not care for that, and said she must work if she did not wish to die of hunger. At first the trade went well, for many people, seeing such a beautiful woman, went to buy her wares and paid their money without thinking of taking away the goods. They lived on this as long as it lasted, and then her husband bought a fresh lot of ware, and she sat herself down with it in the corner of the market. But a drunken soldier soon came by, and rode his horse against her stall, and broke all her goods into 1,000 pieces. Then she began to cry, and knew not what to do. "Ah, what will become of me?" said she. "What will my husband say?" So she ran home and told him all. "Who would have thought you had been so silly," said he, "as to put an earthenware stall in the corner of the market, where everybody passes? But let us have no more crying. I see you are not fit for this sort of work, so I have been to the king's palace, and asked if they did not want a kitchen maid, and they say they will take you, and there you will have plenty to eat." Thus the princess became a kitchen maid, and helped the cook to do all the dirtiest work, but she was allowed to carry home some of the meat that was left, and on this they lived. She had not been there long before she heard that the king's eldest son was passing by, going to be married, and she went to one of the windows and looked out. Everything was ready. All the pomp and brightness of the court was there. Then she bitterly grieved for the pride and folly which had brought her so low, and the servants gave her some of the rich meats, which she put into her basket to take home. All on a sudden, as she was going out, in came the king's son in golden clothes, and when he saw a beautiful woman at the door, he took her by the hand and said she should be his partner in the dance. But she trembled for fear, for she saw that it was King Grizzly Beard who was making sport of her. However, he kept fast hold and led her in, and the cover of the basket came off, so that the meats in it fell about. Then everybody laughed and jeered at her, and she was so abashed that she wished herself 1,000 feet deep in the earth. She sprang to the door to run away, but on the steps King Grizzly Beard overtook her, and brought her back, and said, "Fear me not. I am the fiddler who has lived with you in the hut. I brought you there because I really loved you. I am also the soldier that overset your stall. I have done all this only to cure you of your silly pride, and to show you the folly of your ill treatment of me. Now all is over. You have learnt wisdom, and it is time to hold our marriage feast." Then the chamberlains came and brought her the most beautiful robes, and her father and his whole court were there already, and welcomed her home on her marriage. Joy was in every face and every heart. The feast was grand. They danced and sang. All were merry, and I only wish that you and I had been of the party. End of King Grizzly Beard. Iron Hans, from Grimm's Fairy Tales, by Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm, translated by Edgar Taylor and Marion Edwards. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Bob Neufeld. There was once upon a time a king who had a great forest near his palace, full of all kinds of wild animals. One day he sent out a huntsman to shoot him a roe, but he did not come back. "Perhaps some accident has befallen him," said the king, and the next day he sent out 2 more huntsmen, who were to search for him, but they too stayed away. Then, on the 3rd day, he sent for all his huntsmen, and said, "Scour the whole forest through, and do not give up until you have found all 3. But of these also none came home again. None were seen again. From that time forth no one would any longer venture into the forest, and it lay there in deep stillness and solitude, and nothing was seen of it, but sometimes an eagle or a hawk flying over it. This lasted for many years, when an unknown huntsman announced himself to the king as seeking a situation, and offered to go into the dangerous forest. The king, however, would not give his consent, and said, "It is not safe in there. I fear it would fare with you no better than with the others, and you would never come out again." The huntsman replied, "Lord, I will venture at my own risk. Of fear I know nothing." The huntsman therefore betook himself with his dog to the forest. It was not long before the dog fell in with some game on the way, and wanted to pursue it. But hardly had the dog run 2 steps when it stood before a deep pool, could go no farther, and a naked arm stretched itself out of the water, seized it, and drew it under. When the huntsman saw that, he went back and fetched 3 men to come with buckets and bail out the water. When they could see to the bottom, there lay a wild man, whose body was brown like rusty iron, and whose hair hung over his face down to his knees. They bound him with cords and led him away to the castle. There was great astonishment over the wild man. The king, however, had him put in an iron cage in his courtyard, and forbade the door to be opened on pain of death, and the queen herself was to take the key into her keeping. And from this time forth every one could again go into the forest with safety. The king had a son of 8 years, who was once playing in the courtyard, and while he was playing, his golden ball fell into the cage. The boy ran thither and said, "Give me my ball out." "Not till you have opened the door for me," answered the man. "No," said the boy, "I will not do that. The king has forbidden it," and ran away. The next day he again went and asked for his ball. The wild man said, "Open my door." But the boy would not. On the 3rd day the king had ridden out hunting, and the boy went once more and said, "I cannot open the door even if I wished, for I have not the key." Then the wild man said, "It lies under your mother's pillow. You can get it there." The boy, who wanted to have his ball back, cast all thought to the winds and brought the key. The door opened with difficulty, and the boy pinched his finger. When it was open, the wild man stepped out, gave him the golden ball, and hurried away. The boy had become afraid. He called and cried after him, "Ho, wild man, do not go away, or I shall be beaten." The wild man turned back, took him up, set him on his shoulder, and went with hasty steps into the forest. When the king came home, he observed the empty cage, and asked the queen how that had happened. She knew nothing about it, and sought the key, but it was gone. She called the boy, but no one answered. The king sent out people to seek for him in the fields, but they did not find him. Then he could easily guess what had happened, and much grief reigned in the royal court. When the wild man had once more reached the dark forest, he took the boy down from his shoulder, and said to him, "You will never see your father and mother again, but I will keep you with me, for you have set me free, and I have compassion on you. If you do all I bid you, you shall fare well. Of treasure and gold have I enough, and more than any one in the world." He made a bed of moss for the boy, on which he slept, and the next morning the man took him to a well, and said, "Behold, the gold well is as bright and clear as crystal. You shall sit beside it, and take care that nothing falls into it, or it will be polluted. I will come every evening to see if you have obeyed my order." The boy placed himself by the brink of the well, and often saw a golden fish or a golden snake show itself therein, and took care that nothing fell in. As he was thus sitting, his finger hurt him so violently that he involuntarily put it in the water. He drew it quickly out again, but saw that it was quite gilded, and whatsoever pains he took to wash the gold off again, all was to no purpose. In the evening Iron Hans came back, looked at the boy, and said, "What has happened to the well?" "Nothing, nothing," he answered, and held his finger behind his back, that the man might not see it. But he said, "You have dipped your finger into the water. This time it may pass, but take care you do not again let anything go in." By daybreak the boy was already sitting by the wall and watching it. His finger hurt him again, and he passed it over his head, and then unhappily a hair fell down into the well. He took it quickly out, but it was already quite gilded. Iron Hans came, and already knew what had happened. "You have let a hare fall into the well," said he. "I will allow you to watch by it once more, but if this happens for the third time, then the well is polluted, and you can no longer remain with me." On the third day the boy sat by the well and did not stir his finger, however much it hurt him. But the time was long to him, and he looked at the reflection of his face on the surface of the water. And as he still bent down more and more while he was doing so, and trying to look straight into the eyes, his long hair fell down from his shoulders into the water. He raised himself up quickly, but the whole of the hair of his head was already golden and shone like the sun. You can imagine how terrified the poor boy was. He took his pocket-handkerchief and tied it round his head, in order that the man might not see it. When he came he already knew everything, and said, "Take the handkerchief off." Then the golden hair streamed forth, and let the boy excuse himself as he might, it was of no use. "You have not stood the trial, and can stay here no longer. Go forth into the world. There you will learn what poverty is. But as you have not a bad heart, and as I mean well by you, there is one thing I will grant you. If you fall into any difficulty, come to the forest and cry, 'Iron Hans,' and then I will come and help you. My power is great, greater than you think, and I have gold and silver in abundance." Then the king's son left the forest, and walked by beaten and unbeaten paths ever onwards, until at length he reached a great city. There he looked for work, but could find none, and he learnt nothing by which he could help himself. At length he went to the palace, and asked if they would take him in. The people about court did not at all know what use they could make of him, but they liked him, and told him to stay. At length the cook took him into his service, and said he might carry wood and water, and rake the cinders together. Once, when it so happened that no one else was at hand, the cook ordered him to carry the food to the royal table, but as he did not like to let his golden hair be seen, he kept his little cap on. Such a thing as that had never yet come under the king's notice, and he said, "When you come to the royal table, you must take your hat off." He answered, "Ah, Lord, I cannot. I have a bad sore place on my head." Then the king had the cook called before him, and scolded him, and asked how he could take such a boy as that into his service, and that he was to send him away at once. The cook, however, had pity on him, and exchanged him for the gardener's boy. And now the boy had to plant and water the garden, hoe and dig, and bear the wind and bad weather. Once in summer, when he was working alone in the garden, the day was so warm that he took his little cap off, that the air might cool him. As the sun shone on his hair, it glittered and flashed so that the rays fell into the bedroom of the king's daughter, and up she sprang to see what that could be. Then she saw the boy, and cried to him, "Boy, bring me a wreath of flowers." He put his cap on with all haste, and gathered wild field flowers, and bound them together. When he was ascending the stairs with them, the gardener met him, and said, "How can you take the king's daughter a garland of such common flowers? Go quickly and get another, and seek out the prettiest and rarest." "Oh, no," replied the boy. "The wild ones have more scent, and will please her better." When he got into the room, the king's daughter said, "Take your cap off. It is not seemly to keep it on in my presence." He again said, "I may not. I have a sore head." She, however, caught at his cap and pulled it off. Then his golden hair rolled down on his shoulders, and it was splendid to behold. He wanted to run out, but she held him by the arm, and gave him a handful of ducats. With these he departed, but he cared nothing for the gold pieces. He took them to the gardener, and said, "I present them to your children. They can play with them." The following day the king's daughter again called to him that he was to bring her a wreath of field flowers, and then he went in with it. She instantly snatched at his cap and wanted to take it away from him, but he held it fast with both hands. She again gave him a handful of ducats, but he would not keep them, and gave them to the gardener for playthings for his children. On the third day things went just the same. She could not get his cap away from him, and he would not have her money. Not long afterwards the country was overrun by war. The king gathered together his people, and did not know whether or not he could offer any opposition to the enemy, who was superior in strength and had a mighty army. Then said the gardener's boy, "I am grown up, and will go to the wars also. Only give me a horse." The others laughed, and said, "Seek one for yourself when we are gone. We will leave one behind us in the stable for you." When they had gone forth, he went into the stable, and let the horse out. It was lame of one foot, and limped, hobbledy-jib, hobbledy-jib. Nevertheless he mounted it, and rode away to the dark forest. When he came to the outskirts, he called, "Iron Hans!" 3 times, so loudly that it echoed through the trees. Thereupon the wild man appeared immediately, and said, "What do you desire?" "I want a strong steed, for I am going to the wars." "That you shall have, and still more than you ask for." Then the wild man went back into the forest, and it was not long before a stable-boy came out of it, who led a horse that snorted with its nostrils, and could hardly be restrained. And behind them followed a great troop of warriors entirely equipped in iron, and their swords flashed in the sun. The youth made over his 3-legged horse to the stable-boy, mounted the other, and rode at the head of the soldiers. When he got near the battlefield, a great part of the king's men had already fallen, and little was wanting to make the rest give way. Then the youth galloped thither with his iron soldiers, broke like a hurricane over the enemy, and beat down all who opposed him. They began to flee, but the youth pursued, and never stopped until there was not a single man left. Instead of returning to the king, however, he conducted his troop by byways back to the forest, and called forth Iron Hans. "What do you desire?" asked the wild man. "Take back your horse and your troops, and give me my 3-legged horse again." All that he asked was done, and soon he was riding on his 3-legged horse. When the king returned to his palace, his daughter went to meet him, and wished him joy of his victory. "I am not the one who carried away the victory," said he, "but a strange knight who came to my assistance with his soldiers." The daughter wanted to hear who the strange knight was, but the king did not know, and said, "He followed the enemy, and I did not see him again." She inquired of the gardener where his boy was, but he smiled and said, "He has just come home on his 3-legged horse, and the others have been mocking him, and crying, 'Here comes our hobbledy-jib back again.' They asked, too, 'Under what hedge have you been lying sleeping all the time?' So he said, 'I did the best of all, and it would have gone badly without me.' And then he was still more ridiculed. The king said to his daughter, "I will proclaim a great feast that shall last for 3 days, and you shall throw a golden apple. Perhaps the unknown man will show himself." When the feast was announced, the youth went out to the forest and called Iron Hans. "What do you desire?" asked he. "That I may catch the king's daughter's golden apple." "It is as safe as if you had it already," said Iron Hans. "You shall likewise have a suit of red armor for the occasion, and ride on a spirited chestnut horse." When the day came, the youth galloped to the spot, took his place amongst the knights, and was recognized by no one. The king's daughter came forward, and threw a golden apple to the knights, but none of them caught it but he. Only as soon as he had it, he galloped away. On the second day, Iron Hans equipped him as a white knight, and gave him a white horse. Again he was the only one who caught the apple, and he did not linger an instant, but galloped off with it. The king grew angry, and said, "That is not allowed. He must appear before me and tell his name." He gave the order that if the knight who caught the apple should go away again, they should pursue him, and if he would not come back willingly, they were to cut him down and stab him. On the third day he received from Iron Hans a suit of black armour and a black horse, and again he caught the apple. But when he was riding off with it, the king's attendants pursued him, and one of them got so near him that he wounded the youth's leg with the point of his sword. The youth nevertheless escaped from them, but his horse leaped so violently that the helmet fell from the youth's head, and they could see that he had golden hair. They rode back and announced this to the king. The following day the king's daughter asked the gardener about his boy. "He is at work in the garden. The queer creature has been at the festival too, and only came home yesterday evening. He has likewise shown my children 3 golden apples which he has won." The king had him summoned into his presence, and he came and again had his little cap on his head. But the king's daughter went up to him and took it off, and then his golden hair fell down over his shoulders, and he was so handsome that all were amazed. "Are you the knight who came every day to the festival, always in different colors, and who caught the 3 golden apples?" asked the king. "Yes," answered he, "and here the apples are." And he took them out of his pocket and returned them to the king. "If you desire further proof, you may see the wound which your people gave me when they followed me. But I am likewise the knight who helped you to your victory over your enemies. If you can perform such deeds as that, you are no gardener's boy. Tell me, who is your father?" "My father is a mighty king, and gold have I in plenty as great as I require." "I well see," said the king, "that I owe my thanks to you. Can I do anything to please you?" "Yes," answered he, "that indeed you can. Give me your daughter to wife." The maiden laughed and said, "He does not stand much on ceremony, but I have already seen by his golden hair that he was no gardener's boy." And then she went and kissed him. His father and mother came to the wedding and were in great delight, for they had given up all hope of ever seeing their dear son again. And as they were sitting at the marriage feast, the music suddenly stopped, the doors opened, and a stately king came in with a great retinue. He went up to the youth, embraced him, and said, "I am Iron Hans, and was by enchantment a wild man, but you have set me free. All the treasures which I possess shall be your property." End of Iron Hans. From Grimm's Fairy Tales, by Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm, translated by Edgar Taylor and Marion Edwards. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Bob Neufeld. There was once a king whose queen had hair of the purest gold, and was so beautiful that her match was not to be met with on the whole face of the earth. But this beautiful queen fell ill, and when she felt that her end drew near, she called the king to her and said, "Promise me that you will never marry again, unless you meet with a wife who is as beautiful as I am, and who has golden hair like mine." Then, when the king in his grief promised all she asked, she shut her eyes and died. But the king was not to be comforted, and for a long time never thought of taking another wife. At last, however, his wise men said, "This will not do. The king must marry again, that we may have a queen." So messengers were sent far and wide to seek for a bride as beautiful as the late queen. But there was no princess in the world so beautiful, and if there had been, still there was not one to be found who had golden hair. So the messengers came home, and had all their trouble for nothing. Now the king had a daughter, who was just as beautiful as her mother and had the same golden hair. And when she was grown up, the king looked at her and saw that she was just like this late queen. Then he said to his courtiers, "May I not marry my daughter? She is the very image of my dead wife. Unless I have her, I shall not find any bride upon the whole earth. And you say there must be a queen." When the courtiers heard this, they were shocked, and said, "Heaven forbid that a father should marry his daughter. Out of so great a sin no good can come." And his daughter was also shocked, but hoped the king would soon give up such thoughts. So she said to him, "Before I marry any one, I must have 3 dresses. One must be of gold, like the sun. Another must be of shining silver, like the moon. And a third must be dazzling as the stars. Besides this, I want a mantle of 1,000 different kinds of fur put together, to which every beast in the kingdom must give a part of his skin." And thus she thought he would think of the matter no more. But the king made the most skilful workman in his kingdom weave the 3 dresses, one golden like the sun, another silvery like the moon, and a third sparkling like the stars. And his hunters were told to hunt out all the beasts in his kingdom, and to take the finest fur out of their skins, and thus a mantle of 1,000 furs was made. When all were ready, the king sent them to her. But she got up in the night, when all were asleep, and took 3 of her trinkets, a golden ring, a golden necklace, and a golden brooch, and packed the 3 dresses, of the sun, the moon, and the stars, up in a nutshell, and wrapped herself up in the mantle made of all sorts of fur, and besmeared her face and hands with soot. Then she threw herself upon heaven for help in her need, and went away, and journeyed on the whole night, till at last she came to a large wood. As she was very tired, she sat herself down in the hollow of a tree, and soon fell asleep, and there she slept on till it was midday. Now, as the king to whom the wood belonged was hunting in it, his dogs came to the tree, and began to sniff about, and run round and bark. "Look sharp," said the king to the huntsman, "and see what sort of game lies there." And the huntsman went up to the tree, and when they came back again, said, "In the hollow tree there lies a most wonderful beast, such as we never saw before. Its skin seems to be of 1,000 kinds of fur, but there it lies, fast asleep." "See," said the king, "if you can catch it alive, and we will take it with us." So the huntsman took it up, and the maiden awoke and was greatly frightened, and said, "I am a poor child that has neither father nor mother left. Have pity on me, and take me with you." Then they said, "Yes, Miss Catskin, you will do for the kitchen. You can sweep up the ashes, and do things of that sort." So they put her into the coach, and took her home to the king's palace. Then they showed her a little corner under the staircase, where no light of day ever peeped in, and said, "Catskin, you may lie and sleep there." And she was sent into the kitchen, and made to fetch wood and water, and to blow the fire, pluck the poultry, pick the herbs, shift the ashes, and do all the dirty work. Thus Catskin lived for a long time, very sorrowfully. "Ah, pretty princess," thought she, "what will now become of thee?" But it happened one day that a feast was to be held in the king's castle. So she said to the cook, "May I go up a little while and see what is going on? I will take care and stand behind the door." And the cook said, "Yes, you may go, but be back again in half an hour's time to rake up the ashes." Then she took her little lamp, and went into her cabin, and took off the fur skin, and washed the soot from off her face and hands, so that her beauty shone forth like the sun from behind the clouds. She next opened her nutshell, and brought out of it the dress that shone like the sun, and so went to the feast. Every one made way for her, for nobody knew her, and they thought she could be no less than a king's daughter. But the king came up to her, and held out his hand, and danced with her, and he thought in his heart, "I never saw any one half so beautiful." When the dance was at an end she curtsied, and when the king looked round for her she was gone, no one knew whither. The guards that stood at the castle gate were called in, but they had seen no one. The truth was that she had run into her little cabin, pulled off her dress, blackened her face and hands, put on the fur-skin cloak, and was cat-skin again. When she went into the kitchen to her work and began to rake the ashes, the cook said, "Let that alone till the morning, and heat the king's soup. I should like to run up now and give a peep. But take care you don't let a hair fall into it, or you will run a chance of never eating again." As soon as the cook went away, Cat-skin heated the king's soup, and toasted a slice of bread first, as nicely as ever she could, and when it was ready, she went and looked in the cabin for her little golden ring, and put it into the dish in which the soup was. When the dance was over, the king ordered his soup to be brought in, and it pleased him so well that he thought he had never tasted any so good before. At the bottom he saw a gold ring lying, and as he could not make out how it got there, he ordered the cook to be sent for. The cook was frightened when he heard the order, and said to Cat-skin, "You must have let a hair fall into the soup. If it be so, you will have a good beating." Then he went before the king, and he asked him who had cooked the soup. "I did," answered the cook. But the king said, "That is not true. It was better done than you could do it." Then he answered, "To tell you the truth, I did not cook it, but Cat-skin did." "Then let Cat-skin come up," said the king, and when she came he said to her, "Who are you?" "I am a poor child," said she, "that has lost both father and mother." "How came you in my palace?" asked he. "I am good for nothing," said she, "but to be a scullion girl, and to have boots and shoes thrown at my head." "But how did you get the ring that was in the soup?" asked the king. Then she would not own that she knew anything about the ring, so the king sent her away again about her business. After a time there was another feast, and Cat-skin asked the cook to let her go up and see it as before. "Yes," said he, "but come again in half an hour, and cook the king the soup that he likes so much." Then she ran to her little cabin, washed herself quickly, and took her dress out which was silvery as the moon, and put it on. And when she went in, looking like a king's daughter, the king went up to her, and rejoiced at seeing her again, and when the dance began he danced with her. After the dance was at an end, she managed to slip out, so slyly that the king did not see where she was gone, but she sprang into her little cabin, and made herself into Cat-skin again, and went into the kitchen to cook the soup. Whilst the cook was above stairs, she took the golden necklace and dropped it into the soup. Then it was brought to the king, who ate it, and it pleased him as well as before. So he sent for the cook, who was again forced to tell him that Cat-skin had cooked it. Cat-skin was brought again before the king, but she still told him that she was only fit to have boots and shoes thrown at her head. But when the king had ordered a feast to be got ready for the third time, it happened just the same as before. "You must be a witch, Cat-skin," said the cook, "for you always put something into your soup so it pleases the king better than mine." However, he let her go up as before. Then she put on her dress, which sparkled like the stars, and went into the ballroom in it, and the king danced with her again, and thought she had never looked so beautiful as she did then. So, whilst he was dancing with her, he put a gold ring on her finger without her seeing it, and ordered that the dance should be kept up a long time. When it was at an end, he would have held her fast by the hand, but she slipped away, and sprang so quickly through the crowd that he lost sight of her, and she ran as fast as she could into her little cabin under the stairs. But this time she kept away too long, and stayed beyond the half-hour, so she had not time to take off her fine dress, and threw her fur mantle over it, and in her haste did not blacken herself all over with soot, but left one of her fingers white. Then she ran into the kitchen and cooked the king's soup, and as soon as the cook was gone, she put the golden brooch into the dish. When the king got to the bottom, he ordered Catskin to be called once more, and soon saw the white finger and the ring that he had put on it whilst they were dancing. So he seized her hand, and kept fast hold of it, and when she wanted to loose herself and spring away, the fur cloak fell off a little on one side, and the starry dress sparkled underneath it. Then he got hold of the fur and tore it off, and her golden hair and beautiful form were seen, and she could no longer hide herself. So she washed the soot and ashes from her face, and showed herself to be the most beautiful princess upon the face of the earth. And the king said, "You are my beloved bride, and we will never more be parted from each other." And the wedding feast was held, and a merry day it was, as ever it was heard of or seen in that country, or indeed in any other. End of Catskin. Snow White and Rose Red. From Grimm's Fairy Tales, by Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm. Translated by Edgar Taylor and Marion Edwards. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Bob Neufeld. There once was a poor widow who lived in a lonely cottage. In front of the cottage was a garden, wherein stood 2 rose trees, one of which bore white and the other red roses. She had 2 children who were like the 2 rose trees, and one was called Snow White and the other Rose Red. They were as good and happy, as busy and cheerful as ever 2 children in the world were, only Snow White was more quiet and gentle than Rose Red. Rose Red liked better to run about in the meadows and fields, seeking flowers and catching butterflies. But Snow White sat at home with her mother, and helped her with her housework, or read to her when there was nothing to do. The 2 children were so fond of each other that they always held each other by the hand when they went out together, and when Snow White said, "We will not leave each other," Rose Red answered, "Never, so long as we live." And their mother would add, "What one has she must share with the other." They often ran about the forest alone and gathered red berries, and no beasts did them any harm, but came close to them trustfully. The little hare would eat a cabbage leaf out of their hands, the roe grazed by their side, the stag leaped merrily by them, and the birds sat still upon the boughs and sang whatever they knew. No mishap overtook them. If they had stayed too late in the forest and night came on, they laid themselves down near one another upon the moss and slept until morning came, and their mother knew this and did not worry on their account. Once when they had spent the night in the wood and the dawn had roused them, they saw a beautiful child in a shining white dress sitting near their bed. He got up and looked quite kindly at them, but said nothing, and went into the forest. And when they looked round they found that they had been sleeping quite close to a precipice, and would certainly have fallen into it in the darkness if they had gone only a few paces further. And their mother told them that it must have been the angel who watches over good children. Snow White and Rose Red kept their mother's little cottage so neat that it was a pleasure to look inside it. In the summer Rose Red took care of the house, and every morning laid a wreath of flowers by her mother's bed before she awoke, in which was a rose from each tree. In the winter Snow White lit the fire and hung the kettle on the hob. The kettle was of brass, and shone like gold, so brightly was it polished. In the evening, when the snowflakes fell, the mother said, "Go, Snow White, and bolt the door." And then they sat round the hearth, and the mother took her spectacles and read aloud out of a large book, and the 2 girls listened as they sat and spun. And close by them lay a lamb upon the floor, and behind them, upon a perch, sat a white dove, with its head hidden beneath its wings. One evening, as they were thus sitting comfortably together, some one knocked at the door as if he wished to be let in. The mother said, "Quick, Rose Red, open the door. It must be a traveller who is seeking shelter." Rose Red went and pushed back the bolt, thinking that it was a poor man. But it was not. It was a bear that stretched his broad black head within the door. Rose Red screamed and sprang back, the lamb bleated, the dove fluttered, and Snow White hid herself behind her mother's bed. But the bear began to speak, and said, "Do not be afraid. I will do you no harm. I am half frozen, and only want to warm myself a little beside you." "Poor bear," said the mother, "lie down by the fire. Only take care that you do not burn your coat." Then she cried, "Snow White, Rose Red, come out. The bear will do you no harm. He means well." So they both came out, and by the lamb and dove came nearer, and were not afraid of him. The bear said, "Here, children, knock the snow out of my coat a little." So they brought the broom, and swept the bear's hide clean, and he stretched himself by the fire, and growled contentedly and comfortably. It was not long before they grew quite at home, and played tricks with their clumsy guest. They tugged his hair with their hands, put their feet upon his back, and rolled him about, or they took a hazel switch and beat him, and when he growled they laughed. But the bear took it all in good part, only when they were too rough he called out, "Leave me alive, children. Snow White, Rose Red, will you beat your wooer dead?" When it was bedtime and the others went to bed, the mother said to the bear, "You can lie there by the hearth, and then you will be safe from the cold and the bad weather." As soon as day dawned, the two children let him out, and he trotted across the snow into the forest. Henceforth the bear came every evening at the same time, laid himself down by the hearth, and let the children amuse themselves with him as much as they liked. And they got so used to him that the doors were never fastened until their black friend had arrived. When spring had come, and all outside was green, the bear said one morning to Snow White, "Now I must go away, and cannot come back for the whole summer." "Where are you going, then, dear bear?" asked Snow White. "I must go into the forest, and guard my treasures from the wicked dwarfs. In the winter, when the earth is frozen hard, they are obliged to stay below, and cannot work their way through. But now, when the sun has thawed and warmed the earth, they break through it, and come out to pry and steal, and what once gets into their hands, and in their caves, does not easily see daylight again." Snow White was quite sorry at his departure, and as she unbolted the door for him, and the bear was hurrying out, he caught against the bolt, and a piece of his hairy coat was torn off, and it seemed to Snow White as if she had seen gold shining through it, but she was not sure about it. The bear ran away quickly, and was soon out of sight behind the trees. A short time afterwards the mother sent her children into the forest to get firewood. There they found a big tree which lay felled on the ground, and close by the trunk something was jumping backwards and forwards in the grass, but they could not make out what it was. When they came nearer, they saw a dwarf with an old withered face and a snow-white beard a yard long. The end of the beard was caught in a crevice of the tree, and the little fellow was jumping about like a dog tied to a rope, and did not know what to do. He glared at the girls with his fiery red eyes, and cried, "Why do you stand there? Can you not come here and help me?" "What are you up to, little man?" asked Rose Red. "You stupid prying goose!" answered the dwarf. "I was going to split the tree to get a little wood for cooking. The little bit of food that we people get is immediately burnt up with heavy logs. We do not swallow so much as you coarse, greedy folk. I had just driven the wedge safely in, and everything was going as I wished, but the cursed wedge was too smooth, and suddenly sprang out, and the tree closed so quickly that I could not pull out my beautiful white beard. So now it is tight, and I cannot get away, and the silly, sleek, milk-faced things laugh. Ah, how odious you are! The children tried very hard, but they could not pull the beard out. It was caught too fast. "I will run and fetch some one," said Rose-Red. "You senseless goose," snarled the dwarf. "Why should you fetch some one? You are already too many for me. Can you not think of something better?" "Don't be impatient," said Snow-White. "I will help you." And she pulled her scissors out of her pocket and cut off the end of the beard. As soon as the dwarf felt himself free, he laid hold of a bag which lay amongst the roots of the tree, and which was full of gold, and lifted it up, grumbling to himself, "Uncouth people, to cut off a piece of my fine beard! Bad luck to you!" And then he swung the bag upon his back, and went off, without even once looking at the children. Some time afterwards, Snow-White and Rose-Red went to catch a dish of fish. As they came near the brook, they saw something like a large grasshopper jumping towards the water, as if it were going to leap in. They ran to it, and found it was the dwarf. "Where are you going?" said Rose-Red. "You surely don't want to go into the water?" "I am not such a fool," cried the dwarf. "Don't you see that the accursed fish wants to pull me in?" The little man had been sitting there fishing, and unluckily the wind had tangled up his beard with the fishing-line. A moment later a big fish made a bite, and the feeble creature had not strength to pull it out. The fish kept the upper hand and pulled the dwarf towards him. He held on to all the reeds and rushes, but it was of little good, for he was forced to follow the movements of the fish, and was in urgent danger of being dragged into the water. The girls came just in time. They held him fast, and tried to free his beard from the line. But all in vain. Beard and line were entangled fast together. There was nothing to do but to bring out the scissors and cut the beard, whereby a small part of it was lost. When the dwarf saw that, he screamed out, "Is that civil, you toadstool, to disfigure a man's face? Was it not enough to clip off the end of my beard? Now you have cut off the best part of it. I cannot let myself be seen by my people. I wish you had been made to run the soles off your shoes." Then he took out a sack of pearls which lay in the rushes, and without another word he dragged it away and disappeared behind a stone. It happened that soon afterwards the mother sent the two children to the town to buy needles and thread and laces and ribbons. The road led them across a heath, upon which huge pieces of rock lay strewn about. There they noticed a large bird hovering in the air, flying slowly round and round above them. It sank lower and lower, and at last settled near a rock not far away. Immediately they heard a loud, piteous cry. They ran up, and saw with horror that the eagle had seized their old acquaintance the dwarf, and was going to carry him off. The children, full of pity, at once took tight hold of the little man, and pulled against the eagle so long that at last he let his booty go. As soon as the dwarf had recovered from his first fright, he cried with his shrill voice, "Could you not have done it more carefully? You dragged at my brown coat so that it is all torn and full of holes, you clumsy creatures." Then he took up a sack full of precious stones, and slipped away again under the rock into his hole. The girls, who by this time were used to his ingratitude, went on their way and did their business in town. As they crossed the heath again on their way home, they surprised the dwarf, who had emptied out his bag of precious stones in a clean spot, and had not thought that any one would come there so late. The evening sun shone upon the brilliant stones. They glittered and sparkled with all colours so beautifully that the children stood there and stared at them. "Why do you stand gaping there?" cried the dwarf, and his ashen-grey face became copper-red with rage. He was still cursing when a loud growling was heard, and a black bear came trotting towards them out of the forest. The dwarf sprang up in a fright, but he could not reach his cave, for the bear was already close. Then, in the dread of his heart, he cried, "Dear Mr. Bear, spare me! I will give you all my treasures. Look, the beautiful jewels lying there. Grant me my life. What do you want with such a slender little fellow as I? You would not feel me between your teeth. Come, take these two wicked girls. They are tender morsels for you, fat as young quails. For mercy's sake, eat them." The bear took no heed of his words, but gave the wicked creature a single blow with his paw, and he did not move again. The girls had run away, but the bear called to them, "Snow White and Rose Red, do not be afraid. Wait, I will come with you." Then they recognized his voice and waited, and when he came up to them, suddenly his bearskin fell off, and he stood there a handsome man, clothed all in gold. "I am a king's son," he said, "and I was bewitched by that wicked dwarf who had stolen my treasures. I have had to run about the forest as a savage bear until I was freed by his death. Now he has got his well-deserved punishment." Snow White was married to him, and Rose Red to his brother, and they divided between them the great treasure which the dwarf had gathered together in his cave. The old mother lived peacefully and happily with her children for many years. She took the two rose trees with her, and they stood before her window, and every year bore the most beautiful roses, white and red. End of Snow White and Rose Red. From Grimm's Fairy Tales, by Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm, translated by Edgar Taylor and Marion Edwards. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Bob Neufeld. The brothers Grimm, Jacob (1785 to 1863) and Wilhelm (1786 to 1859), were born in Hanau, near Frankfurt, in the German state of Hesse. Throughout their lives they remained close friends, and both studied law at Marburg University. Jacob was a pioneer in the study of German philology, and although Wilhelm's work was hampered by poor health, the brothers collaborated in the creation of a German dictionary, not completed until a century after their deaths. But they were best and universally known for the collection of over 200 folk tales they made from oral sources, and published in 2 volumes of Nursery and Household Tales in 1812 and 1814. Although their intention was to preserve such material as part of a German cultural and literary history, and their collection was first published with scholarly notes and no illustration, the tales soon came into the possession of young readers. This was in part due to Edgar Taylor, who made the first English translation in 1823, selecting about 50 stories, "with the amusement of some young friends principally in view." They have been an essential ingredient of children's reading ever since. End of Grimm's Fairy Tales, written by Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm.